Well, welcome back after Easter. He is risen. That's permanent, you know. That's a forever thing, you know. That Jesus Christ is still fully man today, fully God today, in a resurrected, fully glorified body today. And he'll come back with that and collect us, change us, so that we can be very much like him on the outside, not just on the inside. And so it's a great celebration. And I wanted to spend, before we return to Matthew next week and finish off Matthew, I wanted to spend one more week celebrating Easter. I mean, we celebrate Good Friday, right? The Friday we call good, when he atones, he pays, he defeats Satan on the cross, and he makes payment for our sin. And then the promise of what's yet to come, resurrected life, we celebrate last week, and it is good, and it's fun. And we went last week and enjoyed that through John's eyes. Each of them record some measure of detail, none of them exhaustive, each of them with some sense of uniqueness through the four gospel writers. And I went to John because I thought how fun he writes in many ways to us, because John writes some 60 plus years after the first Resurrection Sunday, after the first Easter. He writes to us in many ways because we don't get to see what they got to see. And his audience, the readers of John's gospel, that God would use these words, they don't get to see. They don't get to see him. And so very much like us, and it's this grand call to faith. And so I say John, interestingly enough, includes that wonderful story of Thomas that we visited last week in chapter 20, and gives us Thomas, who said, unless I get to see, I won't believe. I will never, in fact, he's emphatic about it, I will never believe. And I thought how hard it must have been, we said last week, to wait 8 days. Can you imagine 8 long, eternal days? and then he gets it. Then he gets to see. And you know, we have this beauty in John chapter 20 of, he finally gets to see Jesus with his own eyes. And you have this grand personal belief that happens. I'm certain. You know, Thomas looks at him and says, my Lord and my God. It's very personal, as it needs to be with you and me. It has to be personal. And he comes to this absolute belief that Jesus is resurrected, an absolute conviction that he is the Master, Lord, and God. And then Jesus makes his comments for you and for me. Blessed are those, you believe, Thomas, because you've seen me? Blessed are those who believe and have not seen. That is the essence of faith. That's why God calls us to faith. And then John wraps up, by anyone reading and paying attention to John, you'd swear, don't swear, but he finishes. He's done. He lays out with every Bible student that's ever opened this book with the conclusion of the book at the close of 20. And he makes this comment. Now, Jesus did many other things. This is John chapter 20 and verse 30. Jesus did many other things, many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Period. End of story. Conclusion. Done. Thesis statement. And then, for some odd reason, we have John chapter 21. In humility, let me tell you why we have John chapter 21, which, just like John 20 is so unique to John, so 21 is so unique to John. We shout, we proclaim, we exclaim that this changes everything, and it does. Now that you believe, see, he comes to this conclusion. Now that you believe, now that you have personally confessed that my Lord and my God, you are convinced, in John, that you may have life in his name. It begs the question, for me anyway, now what? Now what? Now, you say this changes everything. What does it change? What has changed? I mean, clearly, heaven and hell has changed for me, for you, if you've placed your faith in Jesus Christ. Clearly, there's a resurrection that's coming one day for me, for you, if you have indeed asked him to rescue you, and you now have life in his name because the Spirit of God now lives in you. And Paul says, listen, if that same Spirit, if he lives in you, you will live. But now what? And John gives us a bonus chapter, I think, to answer the question, now what? Not just so what, but now what? What changes? What changes tomorrow when you go to work and you take off an hour to see the solar eclipse? I had to get that in, sorry. Hopefully. No cloud cover. What changes in your marriage as a result of this? What changes in your public life and in your private life as a result of this? What changes in the way you parent your children as a result of he is risen. He is risen indeed. What changes about the way you spend your time? And spend is a good word. We don't focus on that enough when we speak of time. You spend it. You have the same amount I have. Spend it. What changes about the way you spend your money? We have different amounts in that category. I think John drives home this point in such a beautiful, unique way that he explains that you can't just go on life as you used to. Welcome to John chapter 21. So join me there and watch John give us the answer to the question, with Jesus appearing to them again, and in this tension of, now what? John chapter 21, and he begins like this. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. That's the Sea of Galilee, like Gennesaret. I mean, there's several names that body of water goes by. Sea of Tiberias was, they would have known it in John's day as that common name. He revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself like this, in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, that's the Thomas we just heard about, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, one of them is the author of this book, and two others of his disciples were together, 7 of them. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we will go with you. And they went out and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Now this is a beautiful setup to answer the question, now what? What do? They do what they do. You'll find out in a moment that this is the third time John says that he appears to them as a group. The first couple times were in Jerusalem. He tells them, go to Galilee. They were told to go up north, back where they originally met him. They are there now, and they're doing the thing that they did before. These are fishermen. Peter, James, John, Thomas, they were fishermen. And so they go fishing. Now, many have said, listen, I wonder if is this bad? Is this good? Why did they go fishing? I mean, he's risen. Let's go fishing. I don't know, maybe they were hungry. Did you ever think of that? Maybe they needed some money. They were fishermen. Maybe they just wanted to do something that they enjoyed to do. I don't know that fishing was really a pastime of pleasure, but they enjoyed, I guess, spending their time that way. Maybe it was to resume now, I guess, their old lives. That's what they were. They were fishermen. What did you do before you knew Christ? So they went back and they were fishing. There's a beautiful tension around this, that every reader, every hearer of this, why were they fishing? What were they doing? What's going on here? Was such a thing so as to change everything, the resurrection of Jesus the Christ. Now what? I think it's all over this text. And God answers it for us. They go fishing and, I love this, all night long they caught nothing. Now that's kind of fun and terrible and fun at the same time. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children," I like that, children, some of them were probably older, I don't know. "Children, do you have any fish?" And they answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, that's the way John describes himself through this whole book. He never uses his first name. He never uses his name, but he's in the boat, sons of Zebedee, James and John. John says to Peter, "It's the Lord." And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. Then the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, about 100 yards off. If the first thing was to nail down old and new identity of who they were, this one is to absolutely affirm his identity. It's him. John recognizes him. Peter, having been convinced apparently by John, decides he's not sitting in the boat anymore. Who puts their clothes on to go swimming? But he does. He was working. Outer garment off, outer garment on, and he throws himself into the water. By the way, so that you understand the context of this passage, do not think for a moment that there's any shame left in Peter. There isn't. If there were shame left in Peter for the denial, he would have hid in the boat. He would not have been the first one out of the boat. He would have stayed in the boat and maybe the last one off the boat, not really wanting to face him. But that has been resolved by Jesus. And he loves him. Peter knew that. So Peter jumps out of the boat and gets to shore before everybody else, about 100 yards, a football field. Now listen, this is not the first time this scene has happened. John wants you to know that. You have to know this. For your mind to go back and pull in on this, this is exactly the place where this miracle happened 3 years earlier. Just like this, except a little different. Luke records this. I'll read it to you. Listen for the similarities. Listen for the response. Listen for Peter. Luke chapter 5. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, same Sea of Tiberias, Sea of Galilee, and he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, He asked him to put out a little from the land, and he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon said to him, "Master, we toiled all night long and we caught nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both boats so that they both began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees and he said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with them were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to the land, they left everything and they followed him. This is the scene again. And understand this is not about, hey, if you have Jesus in your boat, you got it made. You get lots of fish. If Jesus is walking with you, your bank account's going to get fat. Yuck. If Jesus is in your boat, he's going to turn your life upside down or right side up. That's the point here. Now, the crazy thing about this passage that you cannot miss in comparison to John chapter 21 is that the exact same miracle happens as happened when he was physically with them. Now it happens when he is physically not. He's not in the boat with them. He's calling from the shore. They hear him. They heard his words. They know his command. They do what he says to do. And they haul in this massive amount of fish. There's a point here that's massive in John, which we don't have Jesus in our boat, not physically speaking, but we have him like this. And they pull off the same miracle that he did with them from before. In him, they do the same thing that they did when he was with them. Now he's not. Mark that down in your mind. It's critical here. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and he hauled the net ashore. They were in such a hurry to get to him, they left the net in the water there, I guess. He hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. I guess that's eyewitness detail. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. So it was something different about the way he looked. You see this multiple times after the resurrection. But they knew it was him. They knew it was the Lord. And Jesus came and he took the bread and he gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus had revealed to the disciples, that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. See and feel what's going on here. I have some fish. Jesus has his own fish already cooking on the broiler. They have fish that he just allowed them through him to catch. The word for fish the fish that he has, osperion, they're normal fish. They're grilled fish. Usually you use that word when the fish is already cooked and ready to eat. The word that's used for their fish is mega. It's a different word. It's the more common word, especially if the fish is still not caught and cooked yet. Mega ichthion. Big fish. Here, I have my little fish over here. Go get some of your fish, add it to mine, and we'll eat together. Wow, there's a symbolic teaching here that's so thick, so rich, so outstanding. You cannot miss it. You join with him to do the very thing that he crafted and shaped them to do, catch. From now on, I'm going to make you catchers of men. John records this comment of Jesus. It's a beautiful one that you might scratch your head on. Scratch no more. Truly, truly, I say to you, John 14, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. Greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. Now we're talking. He's risen. Now what? Now get fishing. Now start fishing. His fish, your fish, our fish. Bring some of yours, add it to mine that I just allowed you to catch. I made you to catch. Now let's eat together. Now what? Now fishing, but different. Now Peter. Now the critical lesson of motivation. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, remember all that Simon said before? He said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, feed my lambs. You know the killer part about this? He says this to him 3 times. 3 times he asks him a very similar question. 3 times Peter responds almost exactly the same way. The killer part here, and there's more ink spilled on this one than I care to talk about. What does these mean? Do you love me more than these? Some people think that he's pointing to the nets and the gear and the fishing equipment. Do you love me, Peter, more than this, your vocation? Or are you just going to go fishing again? Some people think that Jesus is asking him if he loves him more than the other guys. Meaning, the way you love your kids. Do you love your children more than you love Jesus? Don't answer too quick. That's what he was asking Abraham in Genesis 22. Abraham, do you love me more than Isaac? That's what he was asking him. Take your son, your only son, whom you love. First time the word love occurs in the Bible. And offer him to me. Abraham did. Some people think that he's making a comparison between his love for Jesus and their love for Jesus. Do you love me more than these guys love me? Ooh, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe not. Maybe because of his boast that he fails on. Jesus says to them, Matthew, this is our next text next week in the storyline. He says, you will all fall away because of me this night. It's written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter answered him, though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night, Peter, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. He made the comparison, even if all these other schmoes, I won't. Maybe Jesus is asking him, do you love me more than these guys love me? Since he made the comparison. I have no idea. I like that last one. You know, here's the killer is for you. You better figure out what these are. That's the killer here. You better figure out what it is that potentially you love more than him. That's the killer question here. Fill in the blank. Is it your job? Is it your status? Is it your money? Is it your power? Is it your kids? Is it something or someone? That's the question. You need to fill in the blank and not debate too long on what it is here. Yes, Lord, you know I love you. He asks him 3 times total. There is a subtlety of word changing. I think it's a bit significant, but many do not. Jesus uses the agape term the first 2 times he asks, and then he switches the term to phileo, which is a friendship love. The agape is a love that commands and demands sacrifice. For God so agaped the world. Do you agape me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. Peter never uses that first term. In all 3 responses, he never uses agape. Some make a big deal of that. Some say there's no difference. I think there's a subtle difference. I think it's teaching us about Peter's heart. Again, he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know, I phileo you. I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. First thing he told him, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John. There's no doubt that everyone thinks this is because there were 3 denials, so there were 3 kind of public reinstatements here. Okay, fine. I tell you, there was no shame left in Peter, though. Now it's a locking in of motive. Now what? And the question, do you... Now Jesus changes words to use Peter's words. Simon, son of John, do you phileo me? Peter was grieved because he had said to him the third time, do you phileo me? Was he grieved because he asked him 3 times, or was he grieved because he changed the word? I don't know. Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. This is so important because don't get caught up in the weeds and the words. I really think Peter finally got to the point of humility in his heart and his mind and his soul. He was going to understate and over-deliver instead of overstate and under-deliver. That may well be the case here. With him, I'm not going to use that word. I'm going to give him everything I have, and I know it will still be less than he gave for me. But I always want him to ask me for everything, everything, everything. The question here that he's asking him is, do you love me? What is the love test here? This is it. Do you love him? Do you move in such a way that you offer your life so as the highest good of him? Paul writes to the church at Corinth, for the love of Christ controls us. It compels us because we have concluded this. One died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. It is the answer to now what? Jesus would say, love me. Do you love me? Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Peter, 3 times. It's not a push to obedience. It's not a push to fear. Peter, do you fear me? Can you imagine if that was how it would read? Peter, are you going to obey me? Do you love me? You want to know what the heart of a believer looks like for God? Oh, obedience will come. If you love me, you'll obey my commands. That's a fact, not a command. That's a fact. You think it with your children all the time. If you love me, you'll listen to what I tell you to do. If you love me. This is the push of love. Yes, Lord. I think he's telling them, Jesus says, it's enough. When he uses Peter's words, it's enough. Love is enough. Move in such a way that your actions desire his highest good, not your personal highest good. That's love. Love moves and acts and does things on the basis of what's good for the object. What's good for the... What does it mean to love God? Then I want to be able to say, because I'm doing this, I'm doing this because it's better for him, not necessarily for me. love, that's the test here. Look at John, how he writes this. And then Peter, the author and the one being spoken to. John, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. Fear has to do with punishment. And whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, and he hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. Look at Peter. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory. They all acknowledge you're not going to be able to, you don't get your bumpy Easter Sunday like Thomas did. And there's a statement being made here, is that there is no way you're going to love him as much as he loved you. You cannot love God to the extent that he has loved you. He endured hell for you. Now love him back. You can never love God as much as he loved you. That is just a reality. But he calls you to move and to lay your life out. Now, quickly, the evidence. What's the evidence of love? Well, the evidence of love is, what does he say here? Feed, tend, shepherd, watch over, care for, provide for. Remember in the Matthew, the readiness parables? Readiness number 1. How do you handle people? What are you doing with people? Who is that wise and faithful servant whom the master puts in charge of his household while he's gone? Oh, it'll be good for that servant if he's giving them their food and caring for them when the master returns. I tell you, he will put him in charge of all of his stuff. Readiness. How are you handling you cannot miss this. Do you love me? My sheep, my lambs. It's so easy to spend ourselves and to give ourselves, to focus our actions of sacrifice on ourselves, on my own. Isn't that easy? I mean, it's still hard, but you do it for your own. Can you do it for someone who's his? My sheep, my lambs. Feed and tend and care. They're mine. Do you love me? Love them. Do you love me? Love them. Evidence of love number 1, feeding and tending and caring. Evidence number 2, truly, truly I say to you, when you were young, Peter, you used to dress yourself and you walked wherever you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. John puts his commentary in here. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. Evidence number 2, will you die for him? You live and you die for Christ. You live and you die. That's the evidence of love. For Peter, he was literally saying, you're going to be crucified, Peter. Imagine living your life knowing that the end of it was you getting nailed to a tree. It was so brutal. Peter comments on that he knows he's going to die soon in one of his letters when he writes, because God told him, Jesus told him that. John's writing now 65 years later, Peter's dead. John includes this to say that was predicted by God and how he was going to. This is not just for Peter. No one here is going to ever be nailed to a tree. Generally speaking, I can't imagine that would ever happen. But everyone here is called to die and live. Everyone here is called to live and die. You have been crucified with Christ. You no longer live. Christ now lives in you. What's the evidence of love? Of reckoning that I'm dead with him and now I live with him. And the life you live is now him, the way Paul says it. He says this to the church at Rome. This is the essence of dying. I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, because of what he's done. Present your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. He's using Old Testament language of what you would do with the lamb, with the bull, with the goat, you'd bring it and you'd sacrifice it. He's using that language about yourself, but alive. Which means what? Which means I die to me. The things that I do aren't because of me doing what I want to do so I would gain. You don't do what you want to do so that you gain. You do what he wants you to do that he might gain. Remember how he said it? That was it. This wasn't just for Peter. He told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. That was an instrument of death that they now watched him die on. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake, they'll find it. That just means you no longer move for your own selfish gain. I mean, what happens if you were to make a decision and you actually prayed and asked yourself, God, which might be better for your glory? Can you imagine if you'd actually asked that? I have this opportunity to take this job or that job. Which do you think, God, might be better for your glory, not mine? Wow, what a question. If you're like working through college right now, man, I never asked that question. I was too dumb. I didn't have Christ in college. I wish I would have asked that question. Maybe I'd have ended up with the same answer, but I never asked the question. God, should I do this with my time or this with my time? This with my money or this with my money? Which would, God, it's not that he doesn't want you to provide for yourself and care for yourself. Not at all. But the decisions aren't about you anymore. You have to deny you. I mean, he's risen. Now what? Now I'm dead and I live. And that's critical. Lesson number 3, evidence number 3. We'll close here. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. Wow. When he said that to Peter, he meant it. Yikes. Physically. He means it for me and you too. Peter turned and he saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? That's John identifying himself. Peter turns around and sees John following them. When Peter saw him, he says to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? I just love that. I'm going to be crucified? What about him? I wish I could have been a fly. I would love to hear the tone. What about him? Jesus said to him, if it's my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Follow me. You want to know what love looks like? You follow. We each have a unique path. We do it together. But you'll die on the hill of comparison if you start playing that game. And the man who led me to Christ is still at NASA. I stayed for another 10 years after that, and then I left. He didn't follow me. He's still fishing in that pond. A pond I was very grateful that he was fishing in, because God used him to catch me. And I just felt I need to change ponds. What about work tomorrow? I don't know, you tell me, let God tell you. Follow him. We walk a very unique path, an eye, an ear, a nose, an arm. We all have different according to the measure of grace that God has given to us, and we do this corporately together. You don't have to worry so much about someone else's sanctification as much as you offer your life back to God as we do this, as He builds us together. Follow me. I'll make you a fisher of men. Oh, but that was just Peter. No. That's me and you. All of us. Amen? Amen.